Good evening, everybody. My name is Pastor Jeff Duncan. I am the Mission and Ministry Director of Lutherans for Life. And you are here at For Life Live. It is April 20th, 2021. And tonight we're going to hear from a great speaker, a friend of Lutherans for Life, somebody who's very busy in her own right, fighting for life all across the nation. The president of the National Right to Life Committee, Carol Tobias. Now, she has an interesting title for tonight's presentation. I haven't talked about this ahead of time with her, so I know that this is going to be something that she's going to get into. It's called The Movement of Love and the 55 Front Fight for Life. So I'm really looking forward to her unpacking that title. She says the Biden administration is moving quickly to undo all pro-life measures enacted in the previous 4 years. Legislation, good and bad, is moving at the federal and state levels, and the courts are ruling. Pro-euthanasia forces continue to fight for legalized assisted suicide. What's big? What's in the pipeline? The movement of love is called to speak up for those who have no voice. We do that by making our voices heard in our nation's capital and in our states. Now, Carol has been the president of the National Right to Life Committee, which is the nation's oldest and largest pro-life organization. She's a native of North Dakota and has served on the National Right to Life Board of Directors since 1987. From 83 to 91, she was the executive director of North Dakota Right to Life, and in 91 was hired as the National Right to Life political director, a position that she held until 2005. And during her tenure as political director, pro-life majorities were elected to both the U.S. Representatives and the Senate. And in 2000 and 2004, she saw the efforts of National Right to Life's Political Action Committee on behalf of President George W. Bush. In 2014, she testified before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee in opposition to Women's Health Protection Act, more appropriately called the Abortion Until Birth Without Limits Act. And she's been a speaker and presenter and on ABC's World News Tonight, NBC's Today Show, CNN, the NewsHour on PBS, C-SPAN, and Fox News Channel, as well as other numerous television and radio programs. She's been quoted: New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, USA Today. I'm going to put a link up in the chat section. If you have additional folks who would like to register, make sure that you send that to them. We thank Carol for being here tonight. A couple of things that we're going to talk about before we get going. Lutherans for Life has a web page archive of previous For Life Live activities. I'll make sure that that's put into the chat section as well. Future For Life Live events can also be looked up on our homepage. You can scroll down to the calendar. And we usually have those on the first and third Tuesday nights, starting at 7 p.m. each month. May 4th, our next presentation will be with Cheryl DeWitt of Redeeming Life Ministries. And Cheryl is going to talk about her work forming crisis pregnancy centers to help women who are at risk of aborting their unborn children. She's going to talk about the one that was formed in Florida, and then also the new one that's being formed in the Northern Illinois district of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and will open up soon. So we hope that you'll be here for May 4th for Cheryl DeWitt. She's going to talk about the history and how and why they started a maternity home ministry, the mission, why what they do is important, how they minister programs and services, the impact, sharing stories or two of residents, and her desire to see expansion into all the LCMS districts, starting with Northern Illinois. She wants to help you as a group figure out how you can engage and help to support this important work. So I have a couple of thoughts before we get going tonight. Is the government God? Can the government make mistakes? Does the government overreach? And can it force non-moral decisions upon its citizenry? And when it does any of these things, what are we to do? Remember what Scripture says. St. Paul says, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. Romans 13. But what if the authorities don't know what they're talking about, doing, or how they're forcing the citizens to do things that aren't right in return? So let's think about how we can use this Christian worldview to serve both God and our fellow man as our neighbor this night in our conversation. Let us pray. Eternal Lord, ruler of all, graciously regard those who have been set in positions of authority among us, that guided by your Spirit, they may be high in purpose, wise in counsel, firm in good resolution, and unwavering in duty, that under them we may be governed quietly and peaceably. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. All right. We're going to turn tonight's session over to Carol Tobias. Carol, thank you for coming and joining us tonight. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to present to us and share with us. And I'm going to ask all others to make sure that you have yourself muted so there's no unnecessary interruptions. And as you have questions, please put them in the chat session for everybody. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll moderate those questions as we go. Carol, welcome.
Thank you so much, Pastor Duncan. And I'm going to apologize right now. My husband and I were practicing on Zoom, and I've shared a file that I wanted to share with you, and it worked. And now that I'm trying to do it, I can't get it up. I emailed you the document, Pastor. So it's if not, I will make it available to anybody. I'll give you my email. I'll make it available to anybody that wants it. But anyway, I want to thank you. It's a pleasure to be with I grew up in North Dakota. That's where I got started in the pro-life movement. And that's what you were seeing in the background. That is the Theodore Roosevelt National Park in the western part of the state, one of my favorite spots ever. But of course, I ended up at National Right to Life, so I stuck that up in the corner. But I've said for many years that this is the movement of love. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It goes on about love, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Now, I have long referred to the pro-life movement as the movement of love because we seek to help and protect others simply because they exist. They are indispensable human beings made in the image of God. So we work to save people we may never meet, whether those persons are unborn babies saved from abortion or elderly and disabled persons saved from euthanasia. They may never know that it was our efforts and our intervention that made it possible for them to live. Now, I think that is a beautiful expression of love, and our love is also endless in that we will never give up. Times are tough right now, but we aren't going to give up. Babies need us, women need us. Frankly, society as a whole needs us. They need our demonstration of patience, kindness, hope, gentleness, understanding, and most of all, they need our love. I did title this The Movement of Love and the 55 Front Battle or Fight for Life. And I could have maybe chosen any number, but I'm going to just kind of go over briefly. I figured 55 fronts. We have 3 branches of government. There is the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. We have 50 states, and it doesn't matter how pro-life or pro-abortion the state currently is, that is a front, and we all need to be working. And then looking at euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, as also just, I'm going to end with some tangents that you might not think would be something important to the pro-life movement, but I want you to consider them and focus on them and at least kind of be aware of what's happening. And as I'm going through some of what is happening in our government, I want to make very clear, just in case you had any doubts, you probably don't, but the goal of the abortion industry and unfortunately elected Democrats in Washington is to legalize abortion for all 9 months of pregnancy, up to and including through birth, and they want their tax dollars to pay for it. Many years ago, we heard that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. That is no longer used or even allowed in this so-called progressive camp. There are to be no limits, no restrictions, no safeguards on any procedure that ends the life of an innocent preborn child. So I'm going to go through and look at the efforts that are being made by our opponents to reach that goal. First of all, I'm going to start with what is happening at the federal level with the Biden administration. One of the first things he did within about a week of taking office was to pull the United States out of the Geneva Declaration. This is something that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and HHS, Health and Human Services Director Alex Azar had put together. They had worked with several countries around the world because the United Nations is attempting to make abortion an international right. If they would ever succeed, then even a law in Mississippi or Kansas or Montana that would protect unborn children could be considered in violation of international law. So we've been fighting at the UN for many years to keep that from happening. So what Secretaries Azar and Pompeo did was pull together a coalition of several countries, and their goal was to say that, insist that there is no international right to abortion and that every country has the right to make their own laws. There's a lot of pressure on culturally pro-life countries, whether it's Central America, South America, Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe. If they are pro-life, there's a lot of pressure on them to be allowing abortion anyway. And of course, then at the same time, the president pulled us out or reversed the Mexico City policy so that our tax dollars are once again going to organizations like International Planned Parenthood so they can go into other countries and lobby to change pro-life laws and also use our tax dollars to promote and perform abortions as a method of family planning. He also decided that we would again give our tax dollars to the United Nations Population Fund, which supports population control programs like China, where they have used sterilization and forced abortion to control the population. The president has announced that he is reversing the Trump rule on Title X family planning programs. Under the Trump administration, Title X grantees could not share a facility with an abortion provider, and they could not counsel or refer for abortions. That rule is going to be eliminated. So now organizations like Planned Parenthood can counsel and refer for abortion, and then refer to the women just down into the abortionist down the hall. So they will be able to do that again. The proposed rule would require Title X grantees to counsel and refer for abortion, in violation of the federal Weldon Amendment, which prohibits the federal government from discriminating against healthcare entities that don't want to refer for abortions. There are some, not necessarily pregnancy centers, but there are some that will help pregnant women and they want nothing to do with abortion. They will either have to counsel and refer for abortions or refuse to accept. They will just not be eligible for the grant. In previous Democratic administrations, the Title X program was identified as Planned Parenthood's largest source of discretionary funding. And the COVID-19 stimulus bill that Congress just passed includes an additional $50 million for this Title X program. One of my biggest concerns is dealing with the chemical abortions, RU-486 Mifeprex is the brand name for mifepristone, the drug. But I'm going to go back a little bit in some history. In 2000, during the closing months of President Clinton's administration, the Food and Drug Administration approved the use of RU-486 in the United States. Now also known as mifepristone, as I guess I'm assuming that you were all aware, one of the 2 drugs used in early pregnancy chemical abortions. Because of risks to the women associated with its use, including serious complications and even death, rules were put in place as to how it was to be administered. Well, in 2007, Congress gave the FDA authority to place REMS on certain drugs. That's an acronym for Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy. It's a drug safety program for certain medications with serious safety concerns, but it's to ensure that the benefits of the medication outweigh the risks. Now, even the FDA will admit it has it on its website. While all medications have labeling that informs healthcare stakeholders about medication risks, only a few medications require a REMS, the Risk Evaluation and Medication Strategy. Well, mifepristone was placed on that REMS list because of the potential danger it poses to pregnant women. Now, what the FDA required for this drug was that the woman and the doctor or the abortionist meet in person so he can explain the drug and its possible complications. She takes the pills that will dry up the progesterone in her uterus, so the fetus or the baby basically starves to death. A couple days later, she takes more pills to induce contractions in order to expel the dead baby. She then should return to the doctor to make sure she's no longer pregnant, that there are no infections, that the baby, parts of the baby maybe didn't stay in the uterus, and so on. But because of the strict protocols in place with this drug, many OBGYNs didn't even want to bother with the process. But even with all that, chemical abortions make up about 40% of all abortions in the U.S. Now, last year, at the height of the pandemic, the abortion industry, and this is, bad, aided by California Attorney General Javier Becerra, who is now the Director of Health and Human Services, filed lawsuits. They wanted to get rid of the REMS. They said abortion was an essential medical service that cannot be halted, as most medical procedures were, and that it was dangerous for women to go to abortion facilities, so that those requirements should be lifted. They wanted the abortionist to be able to talk to the woman over the internet, like we're doing here, then send the pills to her through the mail so she can perform what is largely a do-it-yourself abortion at home. Well, last summer, a federal judge in Maryland enjoined the FDA regs nationwide and allowed pills to be mailed to women. Well, this January, the Supreme Court stayed that injunction and put the rule back in place. The court said that they owe deference to those who are politically accountable when it comes to public health. Well, last week, with Becerra now at HHS and over the FDA, it was announced that the REMS would be lifted for the duration of the pandemic. Within days, a new group, it's been around for a while, but they were keeping themselves under wraps. They call themselves Abortion on Demand. They announced that they were launching a national telemedicine service to make these pills available to women for home delivery by mail. A doctor has been working for the last year and a half, she's in Seattle, to get licensed in every state and in the District of Columbia. Now, she accomplished that in 49 states, and for some reason, Michigan is the one holdout where she is currently not registered to practice. But she is going to start initially in 20 states, a telemedical abortion service, so she can talk to women over the internet and then dispense pills to them. She can do this all over the country. Now, chemical abortions kill the most vulnerable among us, those little ones, and they harm women. At least 24 women have died after taking these drugs. Thousands more have been hospitalized with hemorrhages, infections, ruptures from undetected ectopic pregnancies, and countless or failed incomplete abortions. Now, the abortion industry doesn't want abortion rare. And after looking into this at all, just a little bit or at all, you can easily become convinced that they don't care about it being safe. And then last week, the National Institutes of Health announced that applications for research using fetal tissue would no longer be reviewed by an ethics advisory board. The Biden administration has dismantled the process of making researchers meet any ethical standards when it comes to harvesting the body parts of aborted children for research. I'll tell you, last week was a little bit overwhelming to get the Title 10 regulations lifted or reversed, to see what they were doing with RU 486, making it so easily and readily available, lifting some of the regulations on fetal tissue research. It was just a little overwhelming. And I actually sat down and I thought, is there any way that they can, any other way that they can find to kill and dehumanize these little humans? Because they are just going at it in such a rapid, dedicated effort. I'm not sure that there's any other issue that this administration is focused on in any way as much as they are right now expanding abortion. So when I was sitting there kind of, I don't want to say in desperation, but certainly very frustrated, I opened a book. I'm reading a commentary on the book of Isaiah, and I opened the book to read these words, and I want to share them with you. Just when all looked beyond hope, Isaiah said, "See, the Lord Almighty. God's people are not to look at the invading army. Instead, they are to see the Lord Almighty." And I just thought that was a great reminder, something I really needed, to keep looking up. God knows exactly what is happening to his children. He knows what's happening in this country. We cannot and shouldn't try to fight this battle on our own. So that gave me the great comfort that I know he's with us, and he knows exactly what's happening, and he's going to be guiding us and directing us all the way. So at this point, this is where I was actually going to share a document that I created, and you wouldn't need it, but it does have a summary of the different legislation that is going through Congress, and some of them might not necessarily look like abortion bills, which is why I wanted to make it available to you.
Carol, would you like me to put that up on the screen and share?
If you could, that would be great, either on the screen or somewhere that they can just download and keep it for their own reference later. That would be wonderful.
I have placed it in the chat section. Hopefully the Dropbox link is working, but I'll go ahead and share the screen and put that up there as well for you.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to start first of all with HR 5, that's House Resolution 5. It's called the Equality Act. And, they're trying to make sure that everybody is treated equally, no matter your gender or, whatever else you might want to, however you want to think of yourself. But this bill would amend the 1964 Civil Rights Act, adding language that could be used to make abortions more available, expand taxpayer funding of abortion, and weaken conscience protection for healthcare providers who are opposed to participating in abortions. So if you just think Equality Act, what does that have to do with abortion? Well, it has a lot to do with it. The House has already passed the bill. It was almost a solid party line vote. 3 Republicans supported it. No Democrats opposed it. And that is currently waiting now for Senate action. And Chuck Schumer could take this up at any time in the Senate. And I'm going to talk about the filibuster a little later, which is the only thing that's going to save us on many of these bills that are coming through. The House has already voted on the Equal Rights Amendment. And some of you may have been around for the fight back in the 70s or early 80s. Back in 1972, Congress approved Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. They got the necessary 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. They placed a 7-year deadline. They said the states had to ratify before March of 1979. Well, as that deadline was coming up, only 35 states had ratified the amendment. They need 38. 5 of them had rescinded ratification, and nobody really knew, and I don't think any court has really decided whether or not those 5 rescissions count, or if those 5 are still on the list of states that have ratified the amendment. Well, in 1978, as the deadline was approaching and they did not have enough states, Congress passed a resolution extending the deadline for another 39 months. In that time, no additional states ratified that, and by 1982, the U.S. Supreme Court said the entire controversy was moot and the ERA was dead. None of the deadlines had been met for getting the number of states to ratify. Well, since that time, 3 states, just in the last couple of years, Illinois, Nevada, and Virginia, have passed that, have ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. So now Democrats in Congress are trying to say that the 7-year deadline wasn't really part of the initial bill, so there is no deadline. And we can now have 38 states that have ratified, and the Equal Rights Amendment should be placed in the Constitution. Now, leaders of key pro-abortion groups such as NOW and NARAL and Planned Parenthood say that the ERA could keep abortion legal even if Roe v. Wade is overturned, and that it would invalidate hundreds of pro-life laws and require tax funding of abortion on demand. So our opponents in this battle are pushing for the Equal Rights Amendment because they think that's going to solve their problems. They get it into the Constitution, and we can't do anything to save unborn children. Now, North Dakota, during this legislative session, passed what they're calling a Count Us Out bill. What it said was the amendment we ratified in 1975 died in 1979. So don't include us in that list of 38 when you're saying that states have passed, and ratified this amendment. Now, we don't know how this is going to go, except if it's a constitutional amendment, it does seem like you should still need 2/3 of the Congress to even make any changes to the amendment like they are trying to do. Last month, a judge that was appointed by President Obama ruled that the 7-year deadline in the ERA was valid, and that the 3 states that ratified the amendment just in the last couple of years, that has no legal effect, that they can't be counted as towards the 38. Now, there have been a few judges that have ruled on various aspects of the ERA over the years, and not a single one has opened the door to what the Democrats in Congress are trying to do now. But we can't let this slide. We can't assume that it's not going anywhere, or even if both houses of, the House and the Senate pass it, they may find a judge who's willing to look at it and say that this is going to amend the Constitution and that it's official. We can't rely on any of that. If it does get it by some freaky, mistake, get into the Constitution, it's going to be a lot harder to repeal. So the Equal Rights Amendment, pay attention to it. The other side is serious. They want it. We have to stop it. Another one that has just come up is the Paycheck Fairness Act, House Resolution 7. It was meant to address potential discrimination regarding any gender pay gap. But there were last-minute amendments and could be interpreted to require employers to cover elective abortions in their health care benefits. There is nothing in the language that would place Hyde Amendment language in there so that abortions can't be covered, which means abortion would be included, and it would have to be included in employer insurance plans. So the Paycheck Protection Act, or Paycheck Fairness Act, has passed the House, and I'm sorry, they were going to vote on it today, and I guess I haven't heard. I don't know if it actually made it, but I'm going to assume it has passed. That's pretty safe with this Congress. So now that'll have to go over to the Senate as well. The COVID stimulus package, everybody was so excited to get their $1,400 checks. There is nothing in that bill that prevents the money from being used for abortions. There is no Hyde Amendment language. Over $414 billion can be used to pay for elective abortion or plans that cover elective abortion. And the package, doesn't mention anything about preventing the money being used to pay for abortions overseas. And as I mentioned earlier, it included an extra $50 million to Title X family planning funding. It passed, of course, both the House and the Senate, and that was a tough one because, we were asking Congress to vote against it because of the Hyde Amendment language, but all of their constituents wanted that stimulus check. But that did go through, and we now have a $1.9 trillion package with almost $500 billion at least being eligible for abortion funding in various programs. Now, when the COVID bill got to the Senate, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma offered an amendment to add Hyde protections to the COVID bill. We got 52 votes, only 47 voted against it, but because of what they call the Senate Byrd rule, we needed 60, so it was not included in the package. And then one other vote that has been taken in the Senate already is the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Senate vote was back in February. They were dealing with their budget reconciliation bill, and Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska offered an amendment to include the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Again, we needed 60 votes. We received 52. So that did not pass, but we do have members on record as whether or not they thought this should be part of the law. And then, of course, there have been a lot of different bills introduced, the ones that are going to be more familiar to the pro-life community. The Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, a ban on dismemberment abortions in the House, no taxpayer funding for abortion, what is called the Save Moms and Babies Act. It's to basically strengthen federal control over chemical abortion methods. There are a few other pro-life votes, and they're not going to have any votes. Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Schumer are not going to be bringing those bills to the floor for votes. What we still need to watch is the budget bill. Medicaid funding, of course, would be included in that. And every year since the late 1970s, we have had to add language to say that this money cannot be used to pay for abortions. The language, of course, sponsored by Henry Hyde of Illinois, so it's always known as the Hyde Amendment. We're going to have to fight that. I don't know if we will be able to keep it out in this Congress. That's going to be a tough one. We may not be able to, for the first time, except I think for 2 years out of the last 50 years. Or 45, we may end up losing the Hyde Amendment in the annual budget. Conscience protections are going to be looked at very seriously by both the administration and Congress in any way that they can to remove conscience protections. They want to force doctors and nurses to perform abortions, to assist in assisted suicide, or if not to perform the abortion, at least be in the room, as the nurse or the whatever medical personnel needed to help. They want to get rid of those so that medical personnel are forced to help kill those babies and help kill the elderly and those with disabilities. One, I don't know, I would say, I don't know if I can call it a bright spot because it's going to be tough. But the House discharge petition on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act was introduced last week. As of last night, there were 208 members of Congress that had signed the petition, but we need 218. If we can get 218 votes, that bill to protect babies who survive an abortion has to come to the floor for a vote. And it doesn't matter what Speaker Pelosi wants. We have to, they have to bring it to the floor for a vote. We can get 212, maybe 213 Republicans to sign the petition, depending on the outcome of a special election in Texas next month. But we would need at least then 5 Democrats to sign. In the last Congress, we had 3 that signed, but 2 of them were defeated in last year's elections. So it's going to be very tough to get 5 Democrats to sign that discharge petition to bring the bill to the floor for a vote. But we're going to work very hard. If you have a Democratic member of Congress, I would encourage you to please contact him or her and ask them to sign this bill. This should have nothing to do with abortion. This is a baby who has survived the abortion, is born alive, and needs to be taken to a hospital quickly, needs to get medical care, treating the babies as you would any other baby born alive at the same gestational age. And provide that same care. So this is something we also want to just really work on to maybe wake up people. Do they realize that some babies do survive abortions? And do they realize that there's an effort to make sure that those babies don't live? It's a great educational tool as well as hopefully saving some babies. So I think this is something that we can and should be using to let people know how crazy this country has really gotten, that babies who survive an abortion don't have to be taken care of. Okay, that's federal. I'm now going to go talk a little bit about action in the states, where we are seeing much better results and a lot more optimism coming from the states than we are seeing on the federal level. Now, according to Planned Parenthood and the Guttmacher Institute, more than 500 bills that would limit abortion have been introduced into 48 state legislatures this year. I love that, 500 bills. And Alexis McGill Johnson, who is president of Planned Parenthood, is quoted in an NBC article as saying, "This legislative season is shaping up to be one of the most hostile in recent history for reproductive health and rights." Now, that means it's a good thing because we've got state legislators who want to pass pro-life bills. They want to protect babies and their moms, which is great. I'm not going to go through everything that we have in all 50 states. I'm just going to mention some of the bills that are kind of working their way through many of the sessions. Of course, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, protecting living unborn babies from being killed by dismemberment abortions, webcam abortions, where a woman can sit down and talk to someone over the internet and get the pills sent to her, the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, Heartbeat, and other bills that would ban abortion early on in the pregnancy. A couple that I think are really very good, very helpful, and will save babies, but also maybe hopefully help their moms. Informed consent is something that is normal and expected for every medical practice except abortion. So a lot of states have had to pass legislation to say informed consent is required or necessary before an abortion. You tell the woman about complications, about alternatives that would be available. Make sure that she has the information before she makes that life or death decision. Well, many states have started adding a requirement that she has to be given the opportunity to view an ultrasound of her baby if she wants it. So we've got states that are now working on that. Informed consent when it comes to abortion pill reversal. The abortion industry would try to say that this is junk science. It doesn't work. It's totally fiction, but it's a fact. Babies have been saved after their mom has started the chemical abortion pill process. If she takes the first pill, and that's the pill that's going to dry up the progesterone in the uterus and basically starve the baby to death. And then before she takes the second set of pills that would expel her baby, if she starts doubting or thinking, I wish I hadn't done that, if she gets to a doctor quickly enough and gets on a heavy dose of progesterone, they've got the protocol already set up, she can maybe save her baby. And some of the states are now telling abortionists that if you are prescribing the chemical abortion to a woman, you have to tell her about abortion pill reversal. Now, we know that more than 2,000 babies in this country have been saved because their mothers took that first pill, changed their minds, got to a doctor, and got help. So we've got some states now saying that if you're going to prescribe this abortion pill, you have to tell her that there is a possibility she could save her baby's life if she acts quickly enough. And I think when we start to see the increase in chemical abortions, this is something that women should be told, that they might be able to change their mind and save that baby. So I'm really excited about that one. I think that could really make a big difference in many lives. Indiana is trying something new when it comes to parental notification. Many states say that you have to notify parents before their minor daughter gets an abortion, but you have to have a judicial bypass so that if the daughter would have some excuse or some reason for not telling her parents, there would be a local judge that has to give consent before she can get the abortion. Now, the abortion facilities have been working with this for years. They know which judges to take the girl to so that, it becomes a rubber stamp. But Indiana thought they would try something different and say that if the parents have not been notified and a judge has given the bypass, that then the parents have to be notified that there was a judicial bypass. That is, struggling in the courts, but the state is trying to defend it. And I would like to see if that's going to work. Of course, a couple states have done things like human disposal of the aborted remains, either burial or cremation. Some of the states are working on discrimination bans. You can't get an abortion if you are doing it because the child has been diagnosed with Down syndrome or because you don't like the sex of the child. That's working its way through. Currently, the 8th Circuit and the 6th Circuit have split on whether or not those kind of bans are allowed. So that's something that may end up in the Supreme Court down the road. And as I said, I do have a list of some of the states that have passed some of these, so I'd be happy to share that information with you later if you have questions, or if you want to email me after this conference or this meeting. Couple of bad bills that have passed, and I need to mention, there is a shortage of abortionists in Hawaii, and we would think that's a good thing. So the state enacted a law to allow advanced practice registered nurses to perform first trimester abortions, including administering the abortion pill and carrying out the DNC or aspiration suction abortions. So they don't have doctors that will do it. So now they're letting registered nurses do it. New Mexico, state I live in, unfortunately, had language on the books from before Roe v. Wade. It just wasn't being enforced. Well, concerned that that law would be enforced if Roe was overturned, the state legislature repealed it. So there are absolutely no protections in place. Women are already coming here for their third trimester abortions because we have a couple abortionists that will do them. But the state has now repealed a law, and there's nothing on the books in any way to protect babies from abortion. They also repealed a law that would provide conscience protection for medical personnel who do not want to participate in the abortion. And they repealed a part of the law that said hospitals would not be required to admit patients for abortions. So we'll see if they're going to start insisting that our hospitals here perform abortions. Constitutional amendments are becoming a little bigger issue in every legislative cycle. And it's kind of easy to pass off. We've got some states that are solidly pro-abortion with their laws and some that are very solidly pro-life, but every state needs to be vigilant. Now, we've got state Supreme Courts in 8 states that found a right to abortion in the state constitution. And those rulings have been used to invalidate the pro-life laws that were on the books. Now, Tennessee voters amended their constitution in 2014, West Virginia in 2018, to override those decisions. And Louisiana decided to be preemptive. They weren't going to take any chances on their Supreme Court ruling. So they passed a ballot measure last year to amend the Constitution. And the language is pretty similar. It says, to protect human life, nothing in this Constitution shall be construed to secure or protect a right to abortion or require the tax funding of abortion. Now, Kansas and Kentucky are going to have constitutional amendments on the ballot next year. And Iowa is in the process of getting it on the ballot for the 2024 election. But it also goes the other way. Vermont will likely have a constitutional amendment on the ballot next year, but it will be an effort to enshrine abortion in the state constitution. And if it passes, Vermont taxpayers could be forced to subsidize every abortion. If you live in the New England area, or if you know family, friends up there, you might want to consider spending some time in Vermont, help Vermont Right to Life. They're going to be working very hard to defeat that measure. It'll be on the ballot, likely be on the ballot next year. And they're going to have a lot of help because they certainly don't want abortion in their constitution, but it'll be very difficult to defeat it there. Now, state laws are kind of like a checkerboard in nature, but there are 3 reasons to push pro-life legislation, even if it doesn't pass. So I would love, at least 3 that I've come up with that I think are critical. The first, of course, is that our goal is protecting unborn children and their mothers. We want to save lives. That's why we do what we do. But second, there's an educational effort that comes from having the legislation discussed in a public forum. We want people to talk about babies who can feel pain during the abortion, or how babies bleed to death as their arms and limbs are torn off in dismemberment abortion. We want them to think about the advantage of a pregnant woman getting an ultrasound so that she can see her baby and hear the heartbeat. Most people will think that makes sense. And those little ones start to become members of the human family that should be protected. And the third that I think is very critical, former Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis referred to the states as laboratories to try novel experiments. Sometimes these laboratories of democracy, I think we'll try something different and novel, something that may have an impact in the judicial system. Now, we don't know when or how Roe v. Wade will be overturned. I think it will be. I believe it will be. And one of the laws that I mentioned may be the vehicle to make that happen. Some states have passed or tried to pass bills that would eliminate all or most abortions. As much as we want to see that happen, those bills aren't even going to get into the pipeline. A local or federal judge will strike it down, and the next court up the line won't even hear an appeal. If the Supreme Court wants to overturn Roe, they can use any bill that comes before it. They don't have to have something that completely bans abortion. They can expand on the ruling and set its own parameters. So we just need to get a case up there. And maybe protections for unborn children will happen in other ways. I remember how astounded I was, and maybe you all knew this, but it took a long time before I did. When I found out that the Dred Scott decision has never been overturned by the Supreme Court. The 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution effectively overturned it. They abolished slavery and they granted citizenship to former slaves. But officially, the court has never repealed that horrific decision. Now, I've always believed that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. I just don't know that when that will be. And I do know that we're closer now than we ever have been. So I'm optimistic. We have a lot of new judges on the federal bench, and I'm hopeful that we will see changes in their rulings, but we won't know until it happens. So taking a quick look at some of the court action. Now, as you know, that many of the laws that have been upheld or allowed by the Supreme Court are things that, require informed consent. They set the amount of time as a waiting period before a woman can go through with the abortion. States can require that parents be given notice before a minor daughter gets an abortion. States don't have to use tax funds to pay for abortions. But for the most part, if the court believes the law places a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking an abortion, it will likely be struck. Now, last June, the Supreme Court ruled on a case in Louisiana. It was June Medical Services v. Russo, that the abortionists do not have to have admitting privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of where he or she is killing babies. That was, the state law. But the court struck it down, and it's very similar to a case in Texas. Now, the court ruled against Louisiana, as it did Texas. Both decisions, of course, were disappointing. But Chief Justice Roberts has raised a few eyebrows. He voted with the majority to strike down the Louisiana law. And he said he did that because it was too close to Texas. And he thought it was important that the court maintain some consistency, that if they struck Texas, then for the same reason, they should strike the Louisiana law. But he wrote a separate concurring opinion that, as I said, is kind of raising some eyebrows. He recognized that the court is trying to decide if a law's benefits outweigh the burdens imposed on women seeking an abortion. And he said, how do you weigh that, to figure out which is going to be more important? He looked back at a 1992 case in Casey. It was out of Pennsylvania. And he said that the standard has changed. Casey set the standard as to whether a law poses a substantial or undue burden on the woman, rather than just trying to weigh whether the benefit outweighs the burden. And from that, I think there are some questions as to what Roberts would do in the future. And states are taking advantage of his opinion. In 2017, there was a federal judge in Arkansas that enjoined 4 pro-life laws that were passed by the state. Last summer, a 3-judge panel of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals vacated her rulings, sent them back to her, and said, take another look at them in light of Roberts' opinion. They said, according to Chief Justice Roberts, the appropriate inquiry under Casey is whether the law poses a substantial obstacle or substantial burden, not whether the benefits outweighed burdens. And several other states that have laws working their way through the process, being challenged and appealed, are also using Roberts' opinion to argue that the laws they are defending should be heard. And they're kind of hoping that just maybe the Supreme Court will be open to the way, that the states want to protect babies and women. So I guess it's just something that we will have to wait and see if his saying, let's go back to the Casey standard instead of the newer, tougher standard, of whether that's going to make a difference on whether some more state laws are upheld. Now, the only real case that's currently pending before the Supreme Court is from Mississippi. They want to protect preborn children at 15 weeks. But the court has been putting it off, and no date has been set for a hearing. Now, they may not take it up, but there have been other cases where the president and Democrats in Congress are looking for any excuse to add more justices to the court. So it's, there's kind of thinking among several attorneys that I have talked to and worked with that there may be several things that the court doesn't do right now because they don't want to give Democrats an excuse to add more justices to the court. So this Mississippi case has been sitting in the Supreme Court, pending a date, and they keep putting it off. So we'll see if anything ever comes from that. There are some cases that are pending in the Court of Appeals out of North Carolina, one dealing with the 20-week abortion ban. In Indiana, whether or not abortion clinics and physicians and hospitals have to report abortion complications. One in Missouri that has a set, if abortion is illegal after 8 weeks, and if that's struck, then after 14 weeks, if that's struck after 18 weeks, if that's struck after 20 weeks. So that one's in the coming up maybe before the circuit court in the 8th Circuit. Alabama has one dealing with parental involvement in an abortion. And there's one out of Georgia dealing with their heartbeat bill. The district court found it to be unconstitutional, but it's been appealed to the circuit court. And then there are, of course, several district cases. One that, I don't know if I should say I find it interesting. It's probably kind of horrifying. Abortionists in Hawaii are suing various parties in Guam because Guam does not let them dispense the abortion pill over the internet. They say it's too expensive for women in Guam to come to Hawaii to get an abortion, and it takes too much time. So they want to, of course, dispense or prescribe the pill over the internet and then send the pills to her. So we'll see what happens with one state suing another so they can kill more babies. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here to euthanasia and assisted suicide. New Mexico this year, unfortunately, became the 10th state, so along with the District of Columbia, to allow physician-assisted suicide. Washington has had assisted suicide for many years, but they had an effort this year to remove some of the so-called safeguards. When the law was passed, they had a 15-day waiting period from the time you seek the pill to when it could actually be dispensed and you could take it. The decision had to be supervised by doctors. There were consultations with psychiatrists or psychologists. Well, this year, Washington State tried to reduce the waiting period from 15 days to 3, expand who could make a terminal diagnosis and prescribe lethal drugs. They wanted to include non-physicians. They wanted to take away the requirement that the lethal drugs be obtained in person. They think the drugs should be shipped by mail. But there was a coalition of pro-life groups, disability rights groups, medical groups, church groups, all working together, kept the bill from passing, and the legislature has adjourned for the year. But the deaf people will be back next session, I have no doubt. California is in the process of removing their conscience protections from the assisted suicide law. If a patient asks for death and the doctor doesn't want to be complicit in that death, the patient can ask and the doctor has to comply in finding someone who will commit the deed. If the doctor is unwilling to help, he or she would be subject to charges of malpractice or professional discipline, possibly losing their medical license, being pushed out of the healthcare practice. This actually likely will pass. California has been pretty crazy. So they have assisted suicide, but they are now taking away most of the restrictions and putting pressure on the doctors to actually perform the abortion. The suicide. Now, we see this all the time. They say, oh, we have safeguards, we have protections, there will be no slippery slope. But then after a few years, the laws change. Waiting times are reduced. Psychological evaluations or depression assessment is no longer required. Definitions are broadened so that now diabetes in many states is a terminal illness acceptable for assisted suicide. You can have insurance companies and state services offering to pay for assisted suicide, but not cancer treatments. It's happening. They get a law in place, and I have no doubt that's going to happen in New Mexico. In a couple of years, they're going to come trying to make it as easy as possible to kill yourself. and they'll force doctors to help you do it. One of the best examples we have of the slippery slope when it comes to assisted suicide is our neighbor to the north in Canada. Their Canadian Supreme Court legalized assisted suicide. They call it aid in dying. But now it's changed so much in just a couple of years. There are no conscience protections for medical personnel, no protection for those who are mentally ill. They have, in a couple of the provinces, a team of roving doctors who will go around various communities helping you commit suicide if your local doctors don't want to. Prisoners are seeking assisted suicide rather than spending years in jail. Limits may be in the initial law, but they don't last. So if you see something coming up in your state legislature and they try to reassure you that there are safe precautions, this is only for those who are terminally ill and almost dead anyway, fight it. We can't let those pass. Okay, I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes and then I will be done. What I'm talking about, what I call tangents, but you know, just looking at them, you'd think that doesn't necessarily fit the pro-life, issues movement, but they are necessary to be involved for our survival. One of the biggest ones is House Resolution 1. So it tells you how important Nancy Pelosi thinks this bill is. It was given that #1 introduction level. It's the so-called For the People Act of 2021. It's intended to make it as difficult as possible for corporations, organizations like National Right to Life, to spend money to communicate with the public about the actions of federal office holders. It's kind of a funny thing, once you get elected to office, somehow you don't think anybody should have the right to criticize you. So what they're trying to do is limit what we can do and put onerous rulemaking processes on us. One of the things they want to do is make sure that anybody who donates to an organization like ours, those names would have to be made publicly available. They just want to keep us from communicating with the public about office holders. They don't want us to be telling the citizens of that senator or that representative, what they're doing in Congress. And it's all backed by the threat of civil and criminal sanctions. This actually did come up in a court case back in somewhere around the 1950s or 1960s. Someone wanted the donor list of the NAACP, and the courts ruled in favor of the NAACP because they said those donors would be subject to harassment and boycott. It was a business, and to protect, the right of citizens to gather together to make their voice heard, those donors did not have to be disclosed. Now, in a state case many years ago, there was a pro-life ballot measure in Michigan, and Tom Monahan, who at the time was president of Domino's Pizza, made a donation to the effort. Well, when his name had to be published, the other side, of course, started a boycott of all Domino's Pizza places. That's something that we would see so much more of now. It wouldn't just be a boycott. I mean, a business that was exposed as donating to a cause that was not in favor with the leading people would probably be torched, from what we've seen just on TV in the last couple of days. So we, of course, are fighting this. We think we have the right to criticize people, criticize members of Congress on what they're doing and what they're saying and how they are voting. And we don't think that people who are donating to our effort should be open for public criticism, derision, boycott, riots, whatever. So HR 1, we are taking an active stand against. It has passed the House, and it will be going over to the Senate for whenever Chuck Schumer wants to bring it up. We, of course, are supporting the filibuster. Right now, with a filibuster, you need 60 votes to stop debate and bring a bill to the floor for a vote. Of course, with a 50-50 split in the Senate, Democrats want to get rid of the filibuster so that Kamala Harris, Vice President and head of the Senate, in charge of the Senate, would be able to cast tie-breaking votes. So we think it's just fine that the Senate needs 60 votes instead of 50. And we had the same position back when the Republicans were in charge. There were some discussions then that we should get rid of the filibuster so Mitch McConnell could, pass more laws than he did. But we understood the danger. if we lose this, it could certainly hurt us more than help. We are concerned about court packing. Of course, adding four more justices to the Supreme Court. The only goal for that to happen is to put more two pro-abortion Democrats in the Senate. The House of Representatives, if they didn't vote on it today, will be voting in the next day or two to expand the Senate and give the District of Columbia the official state status, so that 2 more senators would be elected from the district. Now, last year, Joe Biden got 92% of the vote. Donald Trump got 5.4% of the vote. So there is absolutely no doubt, if the District of Columbia becomes the 51st state, we would have 2 more pro-abortion Democratic senators to contend with. And that may be something that we can't overcome. We have a lot of elections coming up and we need to be involved, but, can we get a majority of, more than 50 with the other side having 52 right now? And then elections coming up. As good citizens, we need to be involved. There are currently 5 open seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. So those will be coming up this fall. New Jersey and Virginia have governor's races. And then again, next year, every member of the House, 1/3 of the Senate, many state legislatures will all be up. And I can't tell you how important it is that we be involved in that political process, supporting good candidates and getting people to the polls to vote for them. Last year in the election in Iowa, in the 2nd Congressional District, pro-life Marionette Miller Meeks won the race by 6 votes. If she had not won, Iowa's 2nd District would be represented by a radical pro-abortion Democratic woman. But because we had 6 votes more than she did, we have a pro-life member of Congress. So we need to make sure that all of our pro-life people are voting in these elections. They know who the pro-life candidates are, and they're making that difference. And then I'm going to close with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. In one of his speeches entitled "The American Dream," he stated, "You see, the founding fathers were really influenced by the Bible. The whole concept of imago Dei, as it is expressed in Latin, the image of God, is the idea that all men have something within them that God injected. Not that they have substantial unity with God, but that every man has a capacity to have fellowship with God. And this gives him a uniqueness. It gives him worth. It gives him dignity. And we must never forget this as a nation. There are no gradations in the image of God. Every man, from a treble white to a bass black, is significant on God's keyboard, precisely because every man is made in the image of God. One day we will learn that. We will know one day that God made us to live together as brothers and to respect the dignity and worth of every man." That's what we are working toward. As a pro-life movement, we recognize that every individual is made in the image of God and that we need to respect the dignity and worth of every man. So I love what Lutherans for Life is doing. I love what National Right to Life is doing. We are reaching different aspects of the community, but with the same message that life is precious and we need to do everything we can to protect it. So with that, I would just say thank you, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Carol. Wonderful presentation. I know it must be difficult to keep 50 states in your mind and pull them up at a moment's notice and say, yeah, this is what's happening in this state, let alone all the different bills that are going through the House and on to the Senate. We do have some interesting questions, and I'm going to open up as we speak these questions. If you are on and you would like to come on, just go ahead. I'll call you out and you can ask the question in person. If I don't see you come up in a short amount of time, then I'll go ahead and ask the question for you. One of our great Lutherans for Life friends and formerly somebody who was in the position that I'm at, Hillary Hawk, Hillary, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, I can. So I'm a mom of 3 little ones, and I struggle to keep up with everything. And it's hard to know who to contact, when to contact them, what to say. And honestly, I just failed to do it because it is overwhelming. And I think it's simply because I don't have a resource to look to do that. And I am in Houston, Texas, and I would like to be more involved vocally within local and at the state level. Is there one resource in particular that you would recommend where I can just go on and see, kind of what's going on and what is recommended for contact wise?
Okay, are you talking national or in Texas? Either,
Probably,
both?
yeah, Texas or even down within the Houston area.
Okay, I know Texas Right to Life is headquartered right in Houston.
Okay.
They are very active with the state legislature and in elections. And I assume it's texasrighttolife.org, but you could just Google them.
Okay.
And it's a strong, great group.
Okay. I will do that for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Carol,
welcome.
does every state have a state right to life that keeps track of these?
Every state does have a group affiliated with us. Some of them are certainly stronger than others. I can just give you my email address, and if you are looking for something in a particular state, let me know, and I will try to get contact information back to you. If anybody wants to contact me, my email is just ctobias@nrlc.org.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to put you in touch with anybody in your, someone in your state. That's ctobias@nrlc.org.
Oops, I didn't get that right. Let me put that in there.
Yeah, C.
My typing skills are not doing good. nrlc.org. There we go. Carol, as a follow-up to Hillary's question, in terms of, just wanting to get something started, we hear all the time, contact your senator or representative.
Mm-hmm.
How effective is that? And do you have are there statistics, are there ways or studies that have been done to show whether or not these contacts actually make a difference and that people change their minds, or how many have to do it? And are there ways, if you're not in that state and you contact the state representatives or senators, does your voice have any voice if you're not a member of that particular state?
Not nearly as much. If you're a representative from Colorado, do you really care what someone in Iowa thinks? If they've got future and, aspirations of running for president, then maybe. But I think putting pressure on your own state or your own member of Congress or state legislator or senator is much more effective. And I think right now the parties are so polarized. If you are a pro-lifer and you are contacting a pro-abortion member of Congress, your representative, they will probably ignore you, just as, quite frankly, some pro-life members of Congress might ignore, emails coming in from someone who's pro-abortion. They're not going to change their mind. But at the same time, I don't think we should let our representatives get away with not hearing from us, because then they think that what they are doing is okay and they have majority support. They still need to hear from us. They still need to know that they have constituents who disagree with them. Because if anything goes wrong, if they have, they're always looking ahead to the next one. If anything goes wrong or there are any problems, they want their constituents upset with them. So, and if nothing else, make their life miserable anyway. If they're going to vote to kill babies, let them hear from the constituents that what they're doing is wrong. and not agreeable to the people in their district.
Is it more effective to contact by phone, by email, by a letter? Is there any way that you can help us understand what's best? And also the sites that say sign our petition, are those effective versus the personal contact?
The personal contact is by far the most effective, but it's hard to do. I don't know what it's like now, but when you know, especially right after 9/11 and in the 10, 15 years after that, even occasionally a member of Congress would get, some letter that a staffer opens and there's, poison in it or something, or some chemical, some powder. So mail really slowed down in going to the offices, and it would be held up for quite a while. I think most of the offices are used to email. If you can get the email address, that's probably the most effective way. You can certainly drive their staff crazy if you have people calling them all the time, so that they're always answering the phone and getting the same message, to save the babies. Petitions themselves probably are the least effective. For online groups, a lot of times it's a way to contact people that they can then, get it put on an email list and maybe start doing some fundraising efforts with it. Individual emails and phone calls, I think, are going to be the most likely. You can go to your member of Congress website and they will probably have a form for you to fill out. They aren't going to give you an email address that people can start spamming them. They want you to fill out the form every time you email them, and that's probably the best way to get their attention.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. There's a hand up, last name Moss. It doesn't look like Sherry, so.
No, I'm her husband, Mark.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
I want to make a shameless plug. From the standpoint of Pastor Jonathan Lang here in Wyoming has organized what's called Two Kingdoms, One Lord, and he's willing to share that, how he did that. But what he has done is worked with conservative pastors to formulate a large group that does regularly petition our state legislators and our national legislators. And he does a terrific job on life issues and marriage issues. And he's found a way to keep track of what's going on in individual cities in that regard. And if you have an interest to have influence and how to have an impact, he can certainly direct you on how to do that. He's done a tremendous job here in Wyoming.
I would appreciate if you would put any connection that you have to that, if there's a website, an email, or a phone number that you can share, and the name of that into the chat section. And
okay.
We'd appreciate hearing more about that. So thank you very much.
I know Pastor Lang, so please say hello to him for me.
I will do that. He's done tremendous work for us here in Wyoming. So, and like I said, he's willing to share it with any district, state to make it work for them.
Great.
So, yeah, he's had a huge influence on a lot of bills here.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Dennis Brink, you had a comment, one of the first ones up, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to share those comments. Dennis?
Okay, find the right button. I had 3 questions on your website for the National Right to Life Committee. There used to be statistics on abortion rate and abortion ratio, and I don't see those there now. I can't find those now. Or if there's some reason why they've been removed, or are they someplace else?
They are still there, just hard to find. One of my goals is to redo the website to make it easier to find things like that. I don't know if I could tell you right now where they are. I know how to look for them.
Okay, I'll look some more.
Okay.
They're under statistics? Are they under
yeah.
statistics?
Another option, and actually one of the best ways that I've found to get information off of our website is to go to information and the National Right to Life News Today. And in the search engine, just put abortion ratio, and you will probably get an article by Dr. Randall K. O'Bannon, who is our education director, and he stays on top of all of that and usually writing articles for the news. That's probably where you're going to find it the best, and it'll be the most current.
Okay. Another question is, there was recently, there's a 100-year worldwide anniversary of the first pro-abortion legislation that was in Russia 100 years ago. And there was quite a bit about that, comparing graphics for graphics comparing the statistics for World War I, World War II, and democides versus abortion worldwide. And abortion is by far greater than any of those. Is something like that a candidate to be put on the statistics in your website?
I know we did have a flyer that showed little crosses of how many people died in U.S. wars. You know, the Revolutionary War, Civil War, 1 and 2, Korea, Vietnam. And then they compared it to the number of babies that have died in the war on children. I don't know that I've seen anything that would connect the Russian 100-year stat. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for something along that line, I don't know that we have it available.
Okay. I guess another thing is, I recall at the LCMS Life conferences, I heard you say a couple times that LCMS is rock solid on theology, but the people you work with say, where are they out in the in the world that you're in? Has that changed, or do you have thoughts about that?
Well, I think one conference that I was at, I used a quote from Dr. Peter Scare at Concordia Theological Seminary. He had written in an article, and he said, when we look at Lutheran support for the pro-life movement, you know, how far would it be for people to say that we are a case of faith without works? And the first time I read that, I thought, wow, you know, coming from a seminary professor, that's pretty profound. I hope teaching all of his students that it's okay to get involved in saving babies. No, I'm seeing a lot more activism from the Lutheran Church, Protestant Church. I will admit I was raised Catholic, and they have always been strong voices in getting their people involved. But I am definitely seeing more involvement from Protestants, evangelicals. I can't say they're outdoing the Catholics, but they're certainly giving them a run for the, I don't want to say run for the money, but they're getting much more active, and it's just so great to see. We need every voice possible.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Dennis. And I think that you can follow up with Carol on her email if you don't find the statistics that you need. She can help
Please
direct
do.
those as well. Ronnie, you had your hand up and wanted to make a comment there.
Yeah, just real quick, just getting back to Hillary's question from before about resources to find out what's going on in the state and nationally. Here in Arizona, for anybody else on the computer who might be in Arizona, we have the Center for Arizona Policy. And I put the web address in the chat, azpolicy.org. They do a fantastic job of tracking bills in the state legislature and also tracking bills nationally. Whenever I have my life team meetings, I always go up to their website and see what's going on with all the bills so I can report back. You can sign up for weekly email addresses. I just got an email that sadly the governor just vetoed an important piece of legislature protecting parents when it comes to sex education for their kids. So that was kind of sad, but that's a resource that we have here in Arizona, and I would encourage its use. And I'm wondering, Pastor Duncan, about whether perhaps Lutherans for Life might want to have a page on the website of contacts like that at the various state levels that people then can look at.
It's a good question, one that you should probably email me about. and we can discuss that. I'm not going to be able to speak for the organization. And I do know that we are speaking the truth in love. We are not political. And so we have to watch ourselves there, but I won't say that we can't do that either. So send me your comments and your ideas, and I'll take it further up the line there. Monica, I wanted to let you've had your hand up, give a little information. And I also wanted to just say that I know that you are very effective in getting information out to your Southern Illinois district. And so thank you for doing that. So make your comment.
Great, thank you. Carol, I love listening to you on issues, etc. I learn so much from you every time you're on. So thank you for agreeing to those interviews. Here in the baby killing state of the Midwest in Illinois, we passed the Reproductive Health Act in 2019, and we rolled out the bloody red carpet to all of our border states. So y'all come and have your abortion here, and we'll actually pay for it. Now we are facing in our legislature 2 bills. We have the repeal of parental notification. That's House Bill 1797, where minors will be trafficked here. Pedophiles, rapists, you name it, will be able to bring children here for abortions, and there will be no, if they get their way, there's going to be no notification. All right. So that's what they're after now. That is still stuck in committee. So witness slips can be filed. I'm sure you're familiar with that process. The other bill is just as heinous, and it's Illinois House Bill 1736. It's mandatory sex education. And it ends with, guess what, y'all? If any form of contraceptive fails, you can just kill your baby. So we're going to teach K through 12. It is the most grievous stuff you've ever seen. I went to the Illinois Illinois State Board of Education to look at the already approved curriculums. We've got 3rd graders learning how to put condoms on in this curriculum. It is sickening. And that's all I'm not going to go any more grievous than that. So we coordinated the 3 districts, Northern, Central, and Southern Illinois on this. We had a pro-life lobbyist from Springfield who works for Illinois Right to Life, which they're the bomb. They really get the information out. Tell us what to do. And we can't get most of our representatives to even respond to us. So one representative told me that an email is an email. A phone call represents 50 people who, to them, this is how the House of Representatives looks at it. Emails 1 for 1, a phone call's 50 to 1, and a snail mail represents 100 people. So they were telling us the most effective thing was snail mail, a handwritten letter to your representatives. So I'm kind of at my wit's end. The numbers on the witness slips outnumber the proponents of the bill, but we know 10,000 people went to the Capitol during the Reproductive Health Act and showed up at the Capitol. 10,000 people outnumbered them in witness slips, and they still passed the Reproductive Health Act. Given that said, it doesn't sound like we have much a shot at these next 2 bills. What would you recommend? I mean, this has been e-blasted to the entire state of Illinois in Lutheranism. And I will say that Lutherans are starting to smell the coffee and get up and start to act, get more active than they have been. But what could I do? What else how can I incentivize, and what's the next channels?
Just keep plugging away in your communities. Find out how many churches will let someone come in and speak and let people know what's happening. Hand out a piece of paper with, these are talking points, and we need you to be making phone calls or sending a letter. I would focus on getting the communities so riled up that everywhere a legislator goes, someone is asking him about it. The community pressure back in their local district is the only thing I think that could possibly, well, besides prayer, of course, possibly have an impact.
Yeah, we had
and if it does pass, you are not able to stop it, then start looking at some of those legislators, pick out a few districts and run someone against them and win the election next year.
We did have a a few Lutheran churches in the state go to their representative offices because they wouldn't respond to them and stood out in front of their offices, not
Mhm.
protesting, but politely and silently holding up signs, letting people know what's in these bills. In the state of Illinois, a minor has to have parental permission, not notification, to get a tattoo. But we can go in there and have a 12, 13, 14-year-old get an abortion with their parents. So it's very frustrating, Carol. You've been doing
It
this a lot
is.
longer than I have. And our state is egregious when it comes to this.
Illinois is one of the worst. But just keep up the public pressure. Like I said, go to the churches, letters to the editor, make sure people understand what is happening
Okay,
and ask them to get involved.
thank you.
We have another question from Lauren, and it's based on your last quote as well. Lauren?
Hi. Okay, I'm not sure how much, how relevant this question is, but it seems that the very issue is marked as a women's rights issue, and that's not correct. So I'm wondering, sorry, bedtime. I'm wondering how we can change the viewpoint of the issue to what it really is, the civil rights issue that it is. How can we change the rhetoric of that?
In anything we do, whether it's articles, press releases, talking in speeches, civil rights of unborn children. We've been trying to do that, in many ways, but it's easy to fall back on just protecting unborn children, but it is a civil rights issue. And that's a better way to reach people because a large portion of our country is not churched. They don't care if God created, the little ones. Civil rights, they're members of the human family. Just bring it into everything that you do. Whether it's your writings, your letters, your talking, civil rights of babies, they're members of the human family.
And is there a way to pressure, I don't want to say pressure, but to ask our representatives to focus on that? Is that something that they can change the rhetoric in? Like, this isn't just a women's right reproductive issue. This is really a civil rights issue. Is there a way for the higher ups to start using that rhetoric?
Oh, I'm sure there is. Just need to remind them more often. Even in speeches on the floor, if they're, advocating for or against a specific bill, if it's broadcast on C-SPAN, a lot of people are hearing it. So yeah, there would be ways to work that in. It takes a conscious effort to do so.
Okay. Sorry, that was
No,
just what
that is good. Because like I said, we've got a secular culture and we have to work with, the people where they are.
Thank you, Carol. It is important for us to remember the civil rights, and it's important for us to continue to push that forward outside of the God language, because it is something that is important for everybody. That we do have these rights, these inalienable rights that are built into our Constitution, into our Bill of Rights, that we have lived by for hundreds of years, and they should not change just because a public opinion or a few people want to change that opinion at the present time. Joe Meisner, you had some comments and a question here. Joe, please go ahead. Well, I don't. Oh, there's Joe. Joe, are you? You're not unmuted yet.
I'm an attorney that didn't know he was unmuted. Listen, first point I wanted to make, there are three. I go back a long way in terms of national right to life and the pro-life movement. In fact, I was a teenage friend of Dr. Mildred Jefferson and Dr. Carolyn Gerster and Nellie Gray. I mean, they were all teenagers with me, but I hope people remember some of those people who really are our inspiration. The first point I want to make is that we cannot give up hope. You know, that is something I find bothersome and worrisome. And I would remind people, I was reading last week, there was a woman at Auschwitz. She was like a nurse practitioner. She delivered 3,000 babies at Auschwitz. I mean, my God, think of a woman going through and the birth of a child. I don't know what happened to those babies. So the idea, though, is first keep up hope. Don't lose that. That's one of our primary theological virtues. The second point is, many years ago, I used to get one of the best newspapers in the country from National Right to Life. Somehow I don't get that anymore. Is that still being published? And if so, what's the easiest way for each of us to sign up a membership with National Right to Life? That's the second question I had.
National Right to Life news is still being put together on a monthly basis, but it is not mailed out anymore. You would have to come to the website to look for it or sign up. We do have an email list that is, you can just sign up and it will be automatically sent to you each month when it is published online.
And can you pay by credit card online for memberships with National Right to Life?
Yes, there is a way to join. If you go to our website, it's nrlc.org. And on the top, there's ribbons. One says donate. So that's where you could, well, if you make a donation, of course, you can, you're helping support us. Most of what we do is available on the website. Under Stay Informed, if you look at that, there's National Right to Life News Today, which is a daily email. You can either go look for it yourself or sign up to have it sent to your email address. And then there's also National Right to Life News that is done on a monthly basis. And that's the newsletter that or newspaper that I think you are referring to, that we used to send out by mail for many years, but now it's just all online. So it's all there. If you go to nrlc.org and then Stay Informed, you'll have your options to just look at or sign up to receive the daily newsletter email and the monthly big paper, National Right to Life News.
Okay, thank you very much for that second point. The third one, I have heard that there's legislation being proposed that at the national level would restrict and maybe even eliminate the ability of states to pass any laws related to abortion. Are you aware of such an effort?
Well, they want to pass the Equality Act and the Equal Rights Amendment. That would preclude any law from being passed or in any state. There is also I don't know how realistic it is. When Kamala Harris was running for president, part of her abortion plan was to require any state that wanted to pass pro-life legislation to get permission, prior approval from the Department of Justice before you passed any legislation that would protect unborn babies. And if by some fluke, the Department of Justice gave the state permission to, follow through and pass some pro-life legislation, then her plan would allow abortionists and abortion providers to intervene before the courts, on behalf of women, I guess, to stop that law from ever going into effect. So yeah, through bills that are currently working their way through Congress would have the effect of overturning almost every state law that's currently on the books. If Kamala Harris is president, which I certainly expect she will be, she may try to get the Department of Justice to, start, I don't know, putting limits on what states can do. Now, it's certainly much more involved than that, but that was certainly her goal or her effort when she was running for president.
Could states challenge that on some sort of basis, that the states have independent rights under the Constitution and there are restrictions on what the government can do to states?
Well, the 10th Amendment certainly allows the states to, take care of a lot of things in their area. I don't know I think a lot of this would end up in the courts. If they pass the Equality Act or the Equal Rights Amendment, and then they try to say you can't pass any laws in your state that would protect unborn babies, yeah, that would go before the courts. And then it's whether states' rights issue or federal mandate. I think that's why we had 4 years of Donald Trump putting in judges who respect the Constitution. More than a fourth of all judges on the circuit court were appointed in the last 4 years. And I think that would give us some hope and optimism that there are judges there that would understand you can't make a national law on abortion. But that's certainly their goal. That's what they want to happen so that no state can pass those laws.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you, Joe, for the question. It is a little after 8:30. I do want to remind you that we will stay on and we'll answer questions. But for those of you who have signed up and know that you need to get off, feel free to exit. We want to thank you for your participation and remind you that in 2 weeks on the 4th, it will be Cheryl DeWitt and Redeeming Life Ministries and talking about crisis pregnancy centers and the things that you can do to support their expansion and support those young women who are facing abortion, instead giving them hope by having a place that they can turn to for their pregnancy and possibly for adoption or for how to be able to care for their baby after the baby is born. So we'll go ahead and continue with questions for Carol at this time. Patty, you had some thought you wanted to bring forth.
Well, apparently there's a big Planned Parenthood facility here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And Carolyn, am I right saying that they're going to be doing chemical abortions there, Carolyn Bass? Carolyn, are you there? Mute, unmute. Anyways, I understand they're going to be doing chemical. They're getting someone in to do it. They're training her.
Carol, are you hearing the question?
Well, I wasn't sure if you were talking to me or someone else. I'm not familiar with that specific facility, but certainly Planned Parenthood wants to get into the chemical abortion. It's cheap, it's easy, and they get several $100s from the client for it. Just because it's cheap and easy for them doesn't mean they're going to pass that on to the client. They're losing abortionists. Abortionists are getting older. They are retiring. Some of them have had such scandal that they've had to retire. They're not getting replacements for them, but they have to make sure abortion is available. So absolutely, every Planned Parenthood facility that can is going to start pushing and promoting the chemical abortion.
Carolyn Bites?
I suppose so. I don't know for sure. We'd have to ask Alan Kind Right to Life. They would know.
Okay,
Is that Kathy?
Carolyn Bites?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Kathy Humberger.
Kathy
Right.
will know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Patty.
You're
Carol, I think that this point cannot be overemphasized about what Planned Parenthood is moving. We've heard from Dr. Donna Harrison as she addressed chemical abortions. The terminology that they're trying to push forward is the same terminology that we've heard about regular abortion, but safe and effective. They're trying to make sure that this gets pushed forward. Are there some things that you could help us with in terms of talking to our legislators to help them understand and make sure that we fight this terminology? Because as you've said, chemical abortion is neither safe and often not effective.
I guess have some statistics handy. We know that thousands of women have had problems with infections, hemorrhaging. Some have required surgery. I'm expecting, as we see more chemical abortions, I don't know if it will be the pregnancy centers, but when you've got women who are delivering their baby in their own toilet and, or in the shower, and they are seeing that little body, I think we're going to start to have some mental illness
We already
concerns.
do.
Yeah. So I would just, have the information available and let them know that this is not as easy as they're making women believe.
Are there statistics on the number of chemical abortions that are being tracked right now? That was a question that Dennis put forward, and I think it's a good one. How can we learn more about the numbers of chemical versus surgical abortions right now?
No way.
On chemical versus regular, the CDC tries to stay on top of it, but not all the states report. The Guttmacher Institute actually has some very good statistics because they go directly to the abortion providers. Because Guttmacher was initially started by Planned Parenthood, the abortion providers trust them, and they are known as a pro-abortion research institute. But they are able to gather information on how many early abortion, what age of the baby, how many chemical abortions, how many section abortions, how many D&Es. I would have to get more information. I'm not sure how specific they are on infections, but our education director, Dr. O'Bannon, that I've mentioned before, has done some reporting on this. So I could certainly see if it's Guttmacher or if he's finding it somewhere else. But I think it is Guttmacher because they just do a very thorough job when they interview the abortion providers.
Excellent. Excellent. Are there any other questions or thoughts that you want to share with Carol? Patty, go ahead.
Oh, Patty, you're muted.
I'm unmuted now. I was wondering, I'm going to be interviewing Senator Mike Braun next week. He's very pro-life, and I just want to know if anyone has questions for me to ask him, because I'll be doing a half-an-hour interview with him on Zoom. If you can write it down or whatever.
Well, if there are some questions, they can put it in the chat section. How would that be, Patty?
Yes, thank you, dear.
Just
And-
thank him for all of his pro-life work in the Senate. He's great to have there.
Yes, he's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you for taking the time to interview him and making that available. Carol, in terms of our Lutherans for Life community, life chapters and life teams, if you could give some advice or say what would be one of the most important things that a chapter or a team could do to aid and benefit this fight across the national level, what do you think would be one or two things that would be the most important for us to be involved in?
I know Lutherans for Life is not, into the political and maybe very little of the legislative arena, and that's fine, but it would be helpful if all the chapters could at least share information with their members, with their churches. These bills are coming up through the state legislature or in Congress. Contact your legislators, let them know that life is important. It's an educational effort. Here in New Mexico, people are shocked that we passed an assisted suicide bill. Well, they shouldn't be. They should be, alerted and know what's coming up. So if the Lutherans for Life chapters are able to do that, even, a bulletin insert, if the pastor is willing to work with them, to just say, these are the bills that we need to, be concerned about. I think that could make a tremendous effort toward educating people, alerting people to what's happening, and then also letting them or encouraging them to speak with their representatives and lobby them, but just let them know that there is support for the pro-life measures in their district or the state.
Good, thank you. I think that's a good imperative for all of our chapters and teams to be considering is adding people who are within your group who might write those newsletter articles or write those bulletin inserts that could be shared with your pastors across the circuits, across the districts that you represent. Because often the pastors don't have time to do the research on their own, and they need to have somebody who is willing to write something that will be able to be shared, so that people can check it out and that they know who to contact, where they can find the information about the current legislation that's in place and the impact that it has. And I think your other point earlier when I asked that question is have some statistics ready. So go to the sites and have some statistics that people can share with each other so that they know the scope and the depth of these particular issues. So as you said, that they're not surprised by the fact that people are actually choosing this. Yeah. In terms of your perception of Right to Life and the national organization, do you have anything on the horizon that that you want to tell us about, that National Right to Life is looking forward to doing anything new or special that's going to be coming up?
Not really.
Okay.
You know, we are working with our state affiliates to try to pass legislation or stop bad legislation. We are working very hard in Congress trying to stop some bad legislation. We're looking ahead to the elections next year. We have to, you know, pick up some more senators. You know, that's what we've been doing for almost 50 years, and we're going to keep doing it. So we don't really go after the next shiny project or whatever. We know what we're doing, and I think we're doing a good job.
You are doing
but
a
we're
good
gonna have to
job.
work. Oh, thank you. But we're gonna have to work really hard next year to elect more senators, because it's too dangerous right now. We can lose too much because it's too close.
Yeah, I think we're all going to look back at this blip in history, how COVID has affected our abilities and brought forth so many changes rapidly, and kind of put us into a funk that it's not been a good place to be. Do you see, because, you know, I quite frankly was very surprised by the results and how quickly things changed. Do you see this turning around in 2022?
I'm an optimist, so I will say yes. I think we're going to elect new senators. We are going to have some, you know, different governors in a few places. But it is going to be tough because some of the Senate races are in states that will be very difficult to win. So we're going into this battle with eyes wide open, but with optimism that we'll pull it through. The pandemic has been tough. You know, we can't go in and have meetings with the senators and members of Congress like we used to. You know, they've got the Capitol walled off. Our people in the states can't go to the state legislators and lobby because the capitals are closed. You know, they're able to isolate themselves. So it has certainly changed the way we do things. But we're finding other ways around them, and we'll keep moving.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, folks, I don't see any other questions coming up or hands being raised. So I do want to thank you very much again, Carol, for spending time with us tonight and
My
sharing
pleasure.
this national perspective. Well, Patty, you have one last comment. Go ahead.
The younger generation, we should talk more to the people who are in church, schools, about pro-life and what's going on. We are doing that already, are we not? Are we allowed in schools? Not just Lutherans, but others?
I think a lot of that varies from state to state, from school to school. It's difficult to get into public schools, but there have been some programs that do promote values without using that word.
Mhm.
that can get in. But
Yeah.
it's very different. When I was in school, our home ec teacher would, order several pro-life movies and show them throughout the year. That it's just tougher to get into the schools now.
We can't
But
even
we do need
pray.
to get to those young people.
Yeah. Because I see some of the March for Life that I have attended, the younger generations of different churches and such were leading the pack, you might say, for this. And we need more people in the political parties who are younger and who are definitely pro-life.
Well, the others, our opponents realize that we are attracting young people. When Nancy Keenan, former president of NARAL, resigned, she did Washington Post did a big interview with her. And she said that she was, on the train, came out of Union Station in Washington, D.C., and she looked down the street and saw there was the March for Life. It happened to be that day. And I thought, oh my gee, for her, look at all those young people. And the former president of Catholics for a Free Choice at one point told a reporter the anti-choice side is getting younger. The pro-choice side is not. So our opponents have seen it, that they can see a lot of young people getting involved. But we also are we're fighting high schools and colleges that are teaching young people that they should be, supporting women's rights and abortion. I guess, we work every once in a while on different things with a group called Secular Pro-Life. We may need to start doing some more of that because not a lot of young people are in church right now. Unfortunately, not enough. And we need to reach out to those who aren't churched, but still see the unborn child as someone that needs protection and has the right to live. So there's a lot of different ways that we can reach young people, but we definitely need to.
I think we might have a comment from Michelle.
Yeah, Patty, I'm so glad that you brought up youth, and I agree. We definitely need to focus on getting them involved, and you're right. Everybody who's mentioned anything about youth is correct. They are very engaged. One of the things, obviously, that Lutherans for Life does is we've started going into Lutheran high schools across the nation. Now, obviously, this last year with COVID, we haven't had a chance to do as much of that. But that will be picking up again this fall, which is exciting, and on Lutheran campuses. But another initiative that we have within the next 6 years that we're hoping to do is start some Y for Life teams on public college campuses that are connected with Lutheran college ministries. So that will be another opportunity for our students to hear that message about life. To get them involved, hopefully politically, but also to be able to shape that message from a gospel motivated voice, right? One that encourages, that shows love, again, to both mother and child, and the elderly, and those in the middle, right, that are maybe contemplating doing harm to themselves, which you see more in that younger generation. So again, it is very hopeful. There are many, many students involved. And yes, that article that you mentioned, Carol, was phenomenal. What a great testament to today's youth, really, for their desire to be engaged. But if you ask someone from Generation Z, which is today's youth, really, those middle school, high school, college youth, they are engaged in politics. They do know what's going on for the most part, and they want to know more. So if you have resources to share with them, that would be great. It's a great idea to do. So.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that information. Monica, you had a comment. You raised your hand.
Yeah, actually, Michelle, you were reading my mind. In our district, Southern Illinois district, we have a life team that's really concerned about the youth. And they did a presentation using Scott Klusendorf's Defense for Life. And their DCE batted every kid down that came up with their, I believe, abortion's wrong because I'm a Jesus person. And he took the role of, I don't care about your Jesus. And what he said to the kids was, we're really not in relativism anymore. We're in nihilism. People don't care. And how do you make them care? Like, so you can argue these points, but they'll say, hey, we know in DC, this is what I heard these women say to me when I marched. We know it's a baby. We know it's a person. We know it's science. We don't care. We don't care is what, and Pat and our President Harrison went right by him saying, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. Because how do you respond? But like, do we need to invent the wheel here in our district, or can I contact you for the high schools that we have? Or do we need to come up with our own thing? I mean, how can you tell me how to get going with you and get
Are you talking about to me or to Carol?
to you?
Okay. Yeah. Contact me. I can help you with that. As far as getting them involved, we have lots of things that are going on even now. Chats for Life every Thursday or every other Thursday night. And this summer, we are starting a brand new curriculum that will focus on how to have that defense theologically, but also how to argue it from a secular perspective as well. So this summer, we're increasing our Chats for Life from 2 times a month to 4 times a month. So we want to get at least 8 weeks in. And again, yeah, have kids come. It's free. It's on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. So that's hopefully a good time for everybody. And it usually goes about an hour. We also have What About Mondays, which is once a month right now. It's an open forum. Kids can come, high school and college kids, and ask questions about any pro-life issue that they want to talk about. If we don't know the answer, we'll do the research and get back to them. But those that have come have asked some really great questions and engaged. So there's already activities going on, and there will be throughout the summer. So yeah, it's
So the high schools can plug in, and can the youth groups from the church
Yes.
plug in?
Absolutely. The youth group there's a youth group from the St. Louis Seminary that comes every once in a while. They're are related to the SEM families. But in addition, like this Sunday, I'll be giving a presentation to a youth group up in South Dakota. And that's what he's doing. I'm going to talk about family and contraception with some middle school, high school kids and their parents. So it'll be a great presentation, but again, focused on, why do we have the stance we do, the for life stance we do, and how do we actually play that out when we're thinking about marriage and planning for the future. So
Awesome.
so yeah.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
Yep.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
All right, folks. We're coming up to the 9 o'clock hour, and I promised Carol we wouldn't go any further than 2 hours. And even though she does have an hour on us in the Central and 2 hours on the Eastern, it's getting late. So thank you all. Carol, thank you very much for sharing this information. It's been a wonderful presentation. I know lots of the folks here have learned so much more, and we really appreciate all that you're doing at the National Right to Life. And we pray the Lord continue your efforts all across the country to get this word out.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here with you all.